San Francisco, California. This is What's Left, a weekly political conversation. A weekly
and discussion.
A weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Abarca with Andy Leibson. Today we'll discuss the topic of... I'll leave it to Andy because you...
Yeah, this was kind of
confused me.
The topic is my irritation with the discussion that has been going on in the mainstream media around the migrant invasion, and my disgust with the tear gassing that went on the immigrant caravan as people tried to cross the border, people talking about it as an invasion, and then Hillary Clinton going to Europe and basically sounding like Donald Trump, talking about how Europe has to do something about its migration problem and immigration problem, and has to do something to stop immigrants from coming across the border. So that stuff and her discussion about that the immigrants are responsible for the rise of nationalism is kind of what I want to talk about today, because I think all of that is wrong.
Mm-hmm. In preparing for this topic, you left it open, but you said somewhere around the ballpark of nationalism.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And immigration.
Yeah.
Globalization.
Yeah.
You even said before this, internationalism.
Yeah.
So I will try to fill in where I think I prepared for, what I think I was in the right direction, but fill in any other area that you might think that also you had in mind.
Okay. Was it okay if I start with some comments about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the Eduardo show.
I need your permission. But you usually start.
I'm kidding.
So, first off, invasion. That's a term that's been used with regards to the immigrants crossing our border.
Even in Mexico.
Right. And let's be clear about what an invasion is. An invasion is when people in uniforms with guns go and cross into your country and shoot up the country, occupy it. The U.S. has invaded many, many countries and is currently invading Afghanistan and Iraq with troops on the ground. An invasion is when you drop special forces behind lines, whether it be in Iran or Syria or Libya. That's an invasion. An invasion is when you send drones into somebody's country and you use those to blow up, buildings and blow up people. That's an invasion. An invasion is not somebody walking across the border to find work. That's not an invasion. And the U.S. is invading country after country after country. U.S. has military all over the globe in many ways, and they're not welcome in all these countries where they have the military. I'd call that an invasion. So the U.S. is invading the world. And it's just outrageous that anybody should possibly use the term invasion to describe people who are coming here for work as a result of the U.S. invasion of the U.S. military and the U.S. economic invasion of the IMF, the World Bank, Western investors, who've basically collapsed the economies of these Central American and South American countries that have made it so people can't find work in their own countries, so they have to come here. So first of all, I'm just disgusted by anybody who might even think to use that word, whether you're a right-winger or a liberal. And the fact is that there are so-called liberals who are actually mirroring the right wing in talking about this, quote, immigration problem. And I want to quote Hillary Clinton here. She was in London, and she was talking to The Guardian about immigration. And she said this. She goes, I think Europe needs to get a handle on migration because this is what lit the flame, referring to the rise of populists like Trump and the movements like Brexit.
Marine Le Pen.
Yeah. If Europe doesn't properly deal with the migration issue, it will continue to roil the body politic. So let's get something straight. Migration did not light the flame of nationalism. And let's be clear about why that migration is taking place in Europe in the first place. A lot of it is due to U.S. policies of bombing Libya, creating a giant refugee crisis. The wars and the continued attacks in Syria, creating another refugee crisis. that has led to people trying to leave those countries and cross into different countries, whether it be Britain or France, Italy. And this immigration crisis is a result of the very the result of the very neoliberal policies, warmongering policies of the United States, and people like Hillary Clinton supported. Hillary Clinton was like patting herself on the back for bombing Libya and killing Gaddafi. And it's the neoliberal policies of the United States and the West that is responsible for essentially uprooting these people and making it so that they have to go elsewhere for work. So it's outrageous that she wants to pin on these immigrants who are refugees of their countries as a result of Western policies, of U.S. policies, of war and invasion, whether it be direct military invasion or economic invasion, that they blame those people for what's going on here. And last, in terms of nationalism, Hillary Clinton is a nationalist. She believes her country right or wrong. She does whatever she can. She's part of the whole capitalist structure of doing whatever she can to support what's in the best interest of the United States. She stands up for the flag. She wants to make sure that the U.S. interests are protected. She's a nationalist. And the only internationalists exist are the people who actually call for open borders. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, which is if you stand up and if you stand up for your American flag, and if you're like my country right or wrong, or even if you're like for my country going over and having to like spread democracy somewhere, then you're a nationalist. And the only people who aren't nationalists are the revolutionaries who call for open borders. That's the internationalist position. That position is the one that says, the person across that border is not my enemy, that's my brother. That person, or my sister, right? Particularly the worker, and who sees that their real enemy isn't to be found across the border. Their real enemy is generally to be found above them, whether it be a politician above them or their boss above them, and that's the enemy that has to be fought. And we all internationally face that sort of struggle with our own local rulers and our own local bosses. So I guess I wanted to start there with some of this stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot to, I think, uncover in this open-ended discussion for this topic. I think that in general, I think where I'm going to go with this is people tend to go into like tribal systems. Like people tend to move into what group systems we feel we are part of. And I think that people with power have seen this naturally happen. I think that things happen as part of human nature, and people in power have exploited this to be able to use to their advantage, by be it neoliberalists and right-wing, what do we call it, alt-rightism in today's politics. I think the climate today that we are experiencing is largely excluded from the legacy that exists of the context that has happened in our global U.S. imperialist system of this country. We see, for example, the Northern Triangle or the northern part of Africa as separate, isolated events as to why people are just coming, because people are just trying to invade.
Right.
And we forget that, Reagan and George Bush, who had passed away this past Friday, Bush was just carrying on the legacy of Reagan in Nicaragua, where they had interfered, where they had meddled with the Central Americans, and you have then the coup in Honduras that we had discussed in the previous episode that our listeners can go and looked back at, and we had explained some. And this is then years and years in the making for people to have this desperation because other people don't know how to keep their hands to themselves.
Right.
And they touch and meddle and want to put people in place. Even like Saddam Hussein was backed by the USA, and the Saudi Arabians are also backed with this Yemeni war, and we'll see an influx of refugees from Yemen, I'm sure.
Correct.
Because we have also been meddling in there. And this is a context that I think people are not privy to. And when they see just people at the fence and at the border trying to cross over, the media puts it as if, oh my gosh, like ants crawling and like the plague is coming over to our country, and these aliens, these illegals are coming. But this has been in the making, boiling and boiling from time, the legacy of past people in power. And for Hillary Clinton to have said something like this, instead of to acknowledge as a Secretary of State herself, igniting and not doing much as a Secretary of State herself in the northern borders of Africa and the Middle East, the perpetuation of the USA and their military stances in those areas, and just to then, she didn't say that like Trump, but it is the same message of scapegoating of migrants. And when you have the economy and the gap in wealth and people, this is my understanding, that when these pressures, social pressures, economic pressures happen, then you start to see that other people, like immigrants and changes that happen, you start to see this is probably the reasons why these things are happening. And it's a form of choosing, placing like resentment somewhere where you are feeling unheard. And that is why people wanted to leave the European Union, because they felt as if people in power were making large decisions about the people behind closed doors in European Union committees that largely folks in the UK do not feel a part of.
Right, they're not elected. The people in the European Union who run that aren't elected by the people in Britain or Germany or France.
So it's just, that is my comment in all this. I think that maybe you agree.
Yeah.
But it is so isolated to just see this invasion and to blame people, and that is the way that it's portrayed. But there is a historical, I was talking to a friend, there's a historical context that cannot be ignored. You have to look at it as a larger picture. You cannot look at it from here. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. I don't know what you want to add.
I agree with that, and I think it's a sign of the weakness of the left that this is the very same sentiment that is in some ways, I would say anti-globalization, anti-European Union, that's leading to a British exit and then maybe an Italian exit, is also being mixed with anti-immigrant sentiment. The fact that those two things are coming together means that these movements, which are essentially, like I agree, are a result of working class anger at the wealthy and the elite, it shows that the fact that it's taken on this form of anti-immigrant anger as well means it's completely safe for the capitalists. It's no threat to capitalism whatsoever. The only way that Brexit becomes a threat if Brexit becomes an exit from European Union with the idea of we're exiting from European Union, but we're entering into a fellowship with our brothers and sisters, other fellow workers in Spain, fellow workers coming across the border from wherever, Syria, from Africa, from anywhere. If you don't have that internationalism of the working class underneath that anger about what's going on with the capitalists basically creating a greater and greater divide, then you're not going to go anywhere. Your whole movement's going to stall, because ultimately, this is the thing, is like that the reason that these immigration laws are in place is not to protect workers, right? One of the things I was noting is at the very week when workers coming across the border, the U.S.-Mexican border, that very week that they were being gassed, here in San Francisco, we have a strike going on at the Marriott Hotel. It's Asian workers, Filipino workers, Latino workers, and white workers as well, who are hotel workers who have really low wages, and it's not enough to actually live here. So they have to have 2 or sometimes 3 jobs. So the slogan for their strike, which they've been on for about 60 days, and I think it might have come to an end today, was one job should be enough, and it isn't, not with their pay as it is. Well, one of the things that I was down at the picket lines, marching around with them, and one of the things that one of my colleagues pointed out was on the other side of the picket lines was bus after bus after bus, 3 or 4 buses at least, of Latino workers being brought in as scabs against that strike. So here's the deal. Do you think some of those Latino workers, they all have papers, right? No. And do you think the capitalists who are bringing those Latino workers, you think they care whether they have papers? No. The very same capitalist class that wants to bring in Latino workers to scab on a strike are the same ones gassing people at the border. So this is not about protecting U.S. jobs. It's not about protecting jobs at all. It's about controlling workers. It's about controlling labor and deciding who gets to walk. They're not building a wall. They're just building a door they can control. They want to make sure that they can control when that door gets opened and when that door gets shut. Who comes in, who comes out. Capital gets to move freely across those borders, but people, no. Workers, no. And we have to have the opposite attitude. As workers, the only way we're going to undo this is if we say, no, we're not going to let you keep a door between us and other workers. We're going to be not just in solidarity, we're going to try to organize with other workers who cross the border and come towards us. We are going to organize and welcome them into our country and bring them into our unions that we need to rebuild, because otherwise they will be used to scab against us and we'll be pitted against one another again. That's what the capitalists will do. Okay? So it's just, I just think that that's really important to understand, is that this whole immigration issue, if the working class does not unlock it properly, if we don't figure it out, that we have to actually become internationalists, and everyone else, if you are not a socialist revolutionary looking to take down capitalism, then by definition you're ultimately going to be a nationalist. Ultimately you're going to be you're going to say, I have to protect some sort of border, I have to protect my country protects my job, my boss protects me. You're going to fall into some kind of trap of that sort. So there is no solution to this, there is no solution to capitalism that gets around this question of open borders, and there is no nationalist solution to what we need to solve. At the same time, I understand why there's been a rise in growing anger about things like European Union, where there was a Greek exit, a threat for the Greeks to exit. Now the British has exited. It makes total sense. But the fact that it's taken on the character of this nationalist character is a dead end. It means that it's absolutely no threat to capitalism and will ultimately be used against workers, the working class itself.
I think that I want to touch on 2 points that you had mentioned, and that is this. Maybe you can help me with this, because my understanding of how it is that normally neoliberalists are pro-globalization. And right-wingers could be conservatives, could be around nationalist, conservative, just within patriotic nationalists. Is this fair to say that would be a sort of generic assessment?
I guess I would say both are nationalists. I mean, the neoliberals, whether they be Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, the Democrats, or George Bush, who recently passed away, they're all nationalists. They're of a different stripe. They're not necessarily isolationists, but they are for projecting U.S. power in the name of the rights of this notion that it's the rights of the U.S. to do what it pleases, and their job is to make sure that their country is in the best position. Not their country, their capitalist class ultimately, but if we want to make the capitalist class the same as the country, which I think is fine, because we don't have it, like for workers, we don't have any stake in our country. Like, we're told all the time, with the Olympics or Pledge Allegiance or standing up during games, that somehow we need to be like proud Americans, but that is not in our interests. It is not in our interests to think of this country as ours, because it isn't ours. It's theirs. All right? What we have to do is take back not our country, we have to take back the globe, and we have to take back our world in the form of an ultimately international revolution that removes national boundaries wherever they are. So they're all nationalists. They're just nationalists of different stripes, nationalists with different agendas. And some nationalists are more openly aggressive about pushing a warlike and economic global agenda. Others speak the language of isolation, but ultimately are probably going to have to do the same thing, which is find a way of projecting U.S. power or their national power to promote the interests of their capitalist class. Trump pretends that he's an isolationist, but he's pushing on China. He's even now trying to make be a little more aggressive with Russia. What's the reason for that? To eventually challenge them not just politically and economically, but militarily.
And then the other point was about open borders. I have mentioned this in the past. People freak out immediately about open borders. They feel it will be out of order. There will not be any order to. There just be chaos and anarchy, where
chaos, right? Yeah.
Chaos. Thank you. And I think what I want to point out for folks is, if we look now, because there's massive migrations happening across this globe at this moment, from Nicaraguans to going to Costa Rica or to Panama, from Venezuelans going to Brazil to Colombia, from Syrians going to Europe, from Central Americans from another train going to Mexico. There's this migration, and with Bolsonaro and Brazil, many Brazilians are going now to Argentina and Chile. It's just massive right now. And I will point out a very good example that isn't necessarily exactly open borders, but they are opening their borders, even without passport documentation or anything. Right now, Venezuela is going through a very harsh economic crisis. And people can't even buy a hot dog with a month's salary. And people are using the money from Venezuela to create bags and stuff. I mean, the money is worthless in Venezuela. And what I want to say about it is that people are fleeing. I don't know the historical dates for this, so pardon me for my Colombian and Venezuelan friends. I know one Venezuelan friend who will tackle me about this later. But for the Venezuelans are going over to Colombia. Colombia has taken over 1 million migrants.
Yeah.
1 million recently of Venezuelans fleeing over to Colombia.
Right.
And a long time ago, Colombia as well was going through some harsh economic recession and some economic upheavals, that Colombians went to Venezuela and then they came back to their country, and they're just paying back in favor for the Venezuelans to go cross over. And we could learn something from this. I'm not saying that they've declared that there is no border, but what they are doing is they've stopped completely, from any other country that I can think of, from not checking in documentation, not patrolling. They're just patrolling in the sense of just making sure that there isn't any crime, but they're just letting in families, and people are just crossing over. Massive migration. And what I want to point out is, this is what we consider a third world country, and here we have a first world country in the USA, and we can't even allow for people to apply for asylumship, or however you call it, asylum. And there is large stadiums in Tijuana right now where people can, with families with this weather, it was a wrong time for this caravan, but with the winter months coming through, people just think Mexico's always hot in climate. It's not. It's going to get really cold in Tijuana. And they should just let them all in, the way that Colombia is an example of just letting Venezuelans come in and giving people a better life. And it hasn't affected them because Colombians did it as well with Venezuela, like I just pointed out, that they had gone. I will post those dates for people later. But this invasion is what I'm trying to tackle, isn't harming or going to kill or going to, it allows people to move the way that we've always moved when there is a necessity throughout the world that we haven't had parameters in the past for. So I thought maybe I should point that out when you had mentioned a point that you had talked about when you talk about migration.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is there's really only two ways you can be on this. You can be an internationalist and welcome your brothers and sisters across the globe to come into your country and find work and organize with them when they find work and try to struggle with them to fight for justice and to fight capitalism. That's called internationalism. And that means you have to be for open borders, because open borders means as soon as you cross the border, you have the same rights as me. You can vote, you can do anything that a worker here can do, and we're going to try to fight for even greater rights, the right to control our lives through strikes and ultimately taking control of our government in the form of a revolution. And we're going to do that. We're going to need to do that together. So you are either that internationalist or you're a nationalist. There isn't anywhere in between. Like, you're either for protecting those borders, some way, shape, or form, or you're for letting people in and building a revolution. There isn't another position between internationalism and nationalism. There is not. There's no third position. So I would agree with people to say that if there were really open borders and we were able to do the kinds of things that we would, there would be chaos, because the state would actually find itself not able to run in the normal way. And that's a good thing. This is not our state. It's the capitalist state. The chaos that would come is their inability to control labor. That's exactly what we want, because that's all a border really is. It's a way for the capitalists to control labor externally and ultimately exercise that same control internally. It's not an accident that the major area where the border was built was under Bill Clinton. And that's at the very same time that our prison population expanded. Let me see if I can find this quote. This is 1995, Bill Clinton's speech in front of the State of the Union. And here's what he writes. All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, this is Bill Clinton now, not Donald Trump, are rightly disturbed by large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration, the Clinton administration, has moved aggressively to secure our borders more by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. Okay? Now, that's what he's saying he's going to do to workers across the border. Listen what he's doing to workers inside his own country. This is the same speech that year, 1995. I know the members of this Congress are concerned about crime, as are all the citizens of our country. And I remind you that last year we passed a very tough crime bill. Longer sentences, 3 strikes and you're out, almost 60 new capital punishment offenses, more prisons, more prevention, 100,000 more police. And we paid for it all by reducing the size of the federal bureaucracy and giving money back to local communities. What he means is we paid for building more prisons and putting more police on the streets by cutting welfare benefits, by cutting what do they call by basically, it was Al Gore's redesign of the government, so that basically the government didn't have to pay as much for social services. So he basically took money from social services to build prisons and build border security. So that's how this works. is the nationalists, and the nationalists are everyone who's not an internationalist. And the nationalists are taking the stripe of Donald Trump or Pat Buchanan or they're Bill Clinton or they're Barack Obama. All of them are nationalists, have only one plan, which is to control labor internally and control labor externally, and use their control of labor to project power abroad and to build profits for themselves, so they're able to project the power that they have. And one of the reasons the U.S. isn't willing to do this, not just because they're meaner, but because they exercise much more rigorous control of their border, because they exercise much more control of their population internally. So the need to exercise control externally is related to the degree that they need to exercise control internally. Mm-hmm. So we should have no illusions that somehow this capitalist class is doing us any favors by putting up a border wall. That border wall is a symbol of the very prison that's being built for us in this country. And Bill Clinton, in the very same speech, talked about it right there. Mm. And by the way, during Bill Clinton's reign, that was when you saw the greatest divide between rich and poor develop in this country in a generation. Mm. So he knows what he's doing. That's nationalism in action. And the fact that the working class in this country sees people like Clinton, Hillary Clinton, or Bill Clinton, or Barack Obama as somehow an ally is no different than the foolish British working class who somehow thinks that going after immigrants is going to be anything that's going to work for them. It's the same. It's the same wrongheadedness. But well, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. I think that when people ask why people become nationalists, how does it stir? How does it make people feel identified with the need for to defend their country, become patriotic? Everyone, I think, is patriotic.
Yeah,
everyone.
If you're not a socialist revolutionary, if you're not looking to take down your own, if you don't want your own government to lose wars, you're a nationalist. That's what being an internationalist means. It's like, I want the U.S. to lose every war it goes in. Lose in Afghanistan. I want them to lose in Iraq. I want them to lose in Central America, wherever they go. I want them to lose and get kicked out. Mm-hmm. That's what I want. That's what an international position would be. I want my military defeated abroad so it can come home and take down my own government. If you don't have that position, you're a nationalist.
And what neoliberalists have done is they have put themselves into power, crying out to the public to say that they are representative of us as the working class. And I wanted to talk about the reason why this populism, like Duterte in the Philippines, has risen, or Bolsonaro in Brazil, even El Bronco in Mexico, who did not win but was very much trying to impose this strict I'll take care of you nationalist rhetoric as well, to put law and order in place in Mexico. Again, he did not win. But the rise of these people, even like Marine Le Pen, who was another person against Macron in France in 2017, for people to understand is that the neoliberalists pose themselves to be this representative of the people, but they're so distant and not a reflection of what people are, that is what and we haven't even discussed it, the deep state, but the establishment is considered as. Mm-hmm. And the establishment, which are composed of the elite class, academics, that's why I don't want you to call me that. There's context to this inside joke we'll talk about later in another episode. But the elite class, middle class, that is just so far removed to understand the struggles of the working class, that is why they go on the polar end and choosing people like Bolsonaro, people like Duterte, and people like the oppositions of these neoliberalists that are in power today. Merkel in Germany, we don't know how long she will be able to last in her power, because there is now a change in order in her government, in her government for her ruling party, that it is a threat to her party. And this is is because of the neoliberalists are not they're not connecting to the people. And I think that is why that is the populism that arose with Trump. Because you have a Democrat like Hillary Clinton, and it's not a reflection of the working class. It's not connected to the work. It's not connected to the people. And that is why many people felt as if Bernie Sanders was more of that, right? But what I want to get at is that Trump was that what you have called many times honest. And we have different distinctions on what honesty means, right? But is honest to his people because he states exactly who he is and what he is really against, and it gives and ignites people to think that is who they want, someone who is transparent and not someone from well-groomed and polished from the political arena already. And so that I think that is part of the reason that this backlash is happening, that we are finding that it's violent and rising against the anti-establishment. I don't know if you have anything to say about that. Maybe you can say more context to that.
I guess the only thing I'd question is whether or not these neoliberals, I would call that like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, the George Bush the first and George Bush the second. All these are neoliberals. I don't think it's the fact that they're out of touch. I think they very much, they themselves are connected to an apparatus, trade union apparatus, liberal apparatus, which is very much in touch with where people are at. But what they do is they know where people are at, but their job is to basically say, I know where you're at, and this is the lie I'm going to tell you to win your vote and to try to fool you into supporting me. And they keep doing it over and over and over again. So they do have a degree of being in touch with people. Now, I do believe that these people think working people are dumb and they're very elitist. Like, I think that is the view of people like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, and probably what I would describe as the liberal, neoliberal, capitalist elite. I think those people are very contemptuous of working people. They think they're stupid and they think they can fool them, and they have been fooling them, and then going around and eventually people become wise to their lies. And so that's what's happened, is people have said, I'm so tired of being lied by Bill Clinton, by Barack Obama, by Hillary Clinton, that I'm going to take this other person who is also a nationalist, but who seems just more honest and who seems like he's going to knock their teeth in. And that's what they want to see. They want to see him kick some butt. And he does a little bit of that. He does it to the media. He does it to the politicians. He calls, what is that, the Schiff guy, Bob Schiff? He called him shit.
What, Bob?
He was a congressperson that Trump twittered, instead of calling him Schiff, called him SHIT. And people were like, oh, how
unpresidential.
How unpresidential. And it's like, no, his base loves that stuff because that's how they feel about these people, because it's true. These people are shit, and Trump just getting away with acting like he's working for them. So there's some genuine anger that these right-wing populists have tapped into. And the problem is the left wing, that's the anger we should have been tapping into. But what did the left wing do? Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. What party are they in?
They sold out to the Democrats.
They sold out to the effing liars. The very liars that people had they wanted nothing to do with anymore. So now the socialists are telling us, go hang out with the liars. Go listen to the liars some more. That's effed up beyond compare. This is what's so tragic about the situation of the left right now, is that it's decided to throw its lot in with the very party that everyone's workers have decided they don't want anything to do with, and they keep trying to sell that same thing to them. It's awful. When what we should have been doing was saying, of course you're disgusted with Democrats, of course but that's nationalism. We offer you an internationalist solution, a solution of internationalist working class revolution that sees your brothers and sisters across the border as your friends, as your allies. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not for open borders. Bernie Sanders is not for open borders. They keep saying it over and over again. That ain't socialism. That's not a challenge to capitalism. So
you posted something about even how he praises even
George W. Bush. He was like, oh, the Honorable George W. Bush, war criminal. Okay, that's just other stuff, But the real tragedy is that this anger that's within the working class, that it's justified, the left has completely failed to relate to it and to give it any direction that's actually independent and that's acting in a revolutionary direction. They have kept on trying to drive them back into the very thing that people are wanting to leave, and they're right to want to leave it because they're sick of it. And so it's a very bad situation, because the longer the revolutionary left stays trapped within the thrall of the Democratic Party, the more people will have no alternative but to go to the right, to this populist right, as an alternative to whatever they face. And there's nothing there. It's a dead end. Mm-hmm. It will end in tragedy, certainly tragedy for the working class, possibly for humanity. That to me is really what's... there's another tragedy. Yeah.
One other area that is related to this conversation, and that is for us to explore, is that as part of the human nature, it is just part of us to, and part of the ego, to identify with things, even in identity. And I know I have fallen guilty to this, where we do form tribal systems, where we do feel that we are better, it's us versus them kind of attitude. And it is this idea that we are afraid. I don't know how evolutionarily we can go back in time and into our history as humans in general, but we do identify, and we want to, and we're scared of change, and we want to protect our own. And even like Latin American countries we screw ourselves because we each think we're the best, you know. And I think that is sort of a universal concept that we feel everywhere, and it's something that we have to sort of come out. And that's why I agree with a lot of the episode that we had also talked about privilege, white privilege, if you want to all look at that episode, where we had discussed that segmenting people or putting people, there is something rich about acknowledging diversity and to bring people out of the shadows that have been mostly erased in history. There is something definitely that we have to do to compensate for the erasure of our history. And there is something that we should always be careful of, and that is falling into us versus them attitude, whether they are black, I am white, or I am Latino, I'm this, or I'm from Mexico and they're from Honduras, or they're from El Salvador. Salvadorans and Mexicans have supposedly this versus thing. And I think that when we talk about nationalism, people in power, I have said this earlier in this conversation, take advantage of that. They know that is our human weakness as people, where we form groups or clans and tribes, and they use it to pit us one over another. And this mayor of Tijuana, who I had mentioned last time, he wants money for his government to support against these migrants. Is the money going to go for the migrants? I do not know. This mayor of Tijuana is very sketchy and is inciting this rhetoric of Mexico first. And that is just a form of, or a way of trying to pit workers against each other. So I don't know how to call it or how to define it, but I just think it comes down to the ego, where we all feel to some extent like familiarity with someone else, that is part of my clan, my group, my tribe, and thus I must defend this person, or I must, and we do it everywhere. I think throughout religion, cross-culturally. Anyway, it's not just a white thing versus a black thing. It's like even people that in my country do, whether it's classist and racist or sexism, there is this relatable things, and I think that I call myself anti-capitalist, but you're the socialist here, and I would dare say maybe that is what socialism is thriving to do, where you are trying to not think as separate groups, but as a collective group to work and to, we're all different, but we're all in this as together in the sense we are in the same lucha or struggle, and we must take care of one another because we are, that is what we are. Like we're not, yes, we are different, and we can respect and love that and cherish that beautifulness of being different, that you have Irish heritage and you have Mexican heritage and you have this Asian heritage. But in the end, we're also people. I think that, and nationalism is not for that.
Right.
Right? You can expand.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree that if we get into the us versus them of black versus white, woman versus man, you American versus Mexican, then we're done. Then we won't but there is still an us versus them that we do have to be cognizant of, which is worker versus capitalist.
I see. That's yeah.
And
I was referring more to the
right.
other.
And and let's be clear, our need to come together is not to make love, it's to make war. Our need to come together is so we can make war on the capitalist. What I mean is, I'll give you the local 2 strike, which is a heroic strike, 50, 60 days of constantly out of work, and people kind of circling around the Marriott and making a lot of noise to distract the patrons there. But here's what they're not doing, and here's what workers need to do, is they're not stopping people from going into Marriott, and they're not stopping workers from going to the Marriott. They're not occupying the Marriott. That's what a strike is. A strike is not a protest. A strike is a statement of, this is my workplace, this is ours, and we're going to claim it, and we're going to fight you for it. We're going to not allow you to get profits out of this place, because we're not going to let any work get done in here. We're not going to let people come in, and if you're going to have to marshal the resources of the city to try to beat us. And strike support isn't just me walking around in a circle. Strike support is me joining the picket line so I can fight off the cops, fight off the scabs. That's what strikes are. And that is what the working class is afraid to do right now. That they do not believe they have that power, because the beauty of our diversity will be a result of the strength it will show in us to be able to make that kind of fight. It will allow us to, instead of having Latino workers come in as scabs, we will actually have other Latino workers who are part of the strike go and talk with them and say, look, brother and sister, don't do this. We want to join with you. In fact, we are for open borders. We are for giving you all the same rights as everyone. So don't break our strike. Now, if they try to break your strike, you will have to make war on them, and because they're picking the wrong side. You have to basically defend your right to control that workplace. But our goal is to try to bring all workers together in this common struggle against our boss. And the reason to fight racism is not just to be nice to each other, which would be good. It's to be able to make more efficient and effective war on the capitalist. That is the reason for our embracing of diversity. Is we can make war way better if we don't allow ourselves to be divided along those racial, gender, sexual orientation lines. That's the reason. It's not so I can be nice to you, although that will come out of it. It's so we can be in struggle against our common enemy. Although the stuff that's going down in Europe right now, I mean in France, that's very interesting. But it shows a level of combativity we certainly haven't seen in the United States. But we need that to come into the United States as well.
Here is a question that I have, Andy, that just to serve my friends in France some just because I'm like this I have to be this vessel of questions that I'm sure that they will have posed if they were in this conversation. they have accepted a large amount of migrants. And one thing I have heard over and over again from especially the host that I stayed with in France for months is that what do you do when you have people from different countries and they, like in Germany, what happened in I forget what was this place, well, where many of the men who have come have different traditions and they come over. I think I have an idea to this, but they come over and they have different traditions on how they relate to women. And they come over to the West and they see all this difference of culture where women have more ownership and authority over their own bodies and dress differently from where they come from more conservative religious backgrounds. And this is where they come in and have done things like in the New Year's Eve of 2015 and 2016, where this place in Germany that's just blanked out on, but it's the reason why I think the Europeans have gotten a bit tired, as they have said. I'm just repeating what they have said, where they're getting tired, and there is a difference in culture, and they're taking in a lot of people, and that is giving them the negative consequences of cultures clashing in once. And when then conversations stir up like assimilation, then there is protests, because if you assimilate them, then there's Islamophobia called into question, because as of right now, France is one of the largest as populations of Muslims, and you don't even have them integrated into society. If we are to have open borders, as some friends will have said in this conversation if they were here, how will cultures, people from different backgrounds be able to reconcile, compromise in two different ways of thinking? So maybe you can, I'm always feeling like I have to explain to people.
Yeah, no.
Maybe you can articulate.
Well, I'll give you my thoughts on it.
Okay.
So
Right.
I'm not religious, but there's a saying Jesus Christ says, right? You talk about the splinter that's in my eye or that person's eye, but you avoid the plank that's in your eye. Meaning,
La paja en el ojo. Yeah, I know what you.
yeah, meaning like,
y
what
la
are you talking about me for? Because
La viga
look
que
at you.
tienes.
And to be honest, like there was a recent study that came out that said that women in this country, and I think our country falls under the same patronizing, chauvinistic notion that we are so over sexism in this country. They found out that women don't make 79 cents on a dollar; they're now making 49 cents on a dollar in this country. Okay, sexism is alive and well in the United States, in Europe, in Africa, in the Middle East, everywhere. All right. So the conditions for women are abhorrent everywhere. They're differently abhorrent, but sexism exists across because it's a result of capitalism. So the fact is that the only way that sexism is going to be challenged is when workers decide to get and struggle with the capitalist, and then that means that we are going to have to figure out how to join and organize with women and make them part of that struggle. So we're not inviting workers from Honduras or workers from Syria just to say, oh, come on over. Like, that's not the reason for our internationalism, so they can just come over and be like, let's hang out and let's be nice and let me teach you how to be culturally. The reason for that invitation for an internationalist is to join in struggle, and to join in struggle against a common enemy, whether that enemy be in Britain or the United States or Syria. That's the reason. That's the reason we're internationalists, is so we can join with our brothers and sisters in that struggle. Now, if our brothers think that they want to do it just with the men, then they're going to lose. I mean, and that's actually been like you look at any revolutionary struggle, even not so much a revolutionary struggle, and they have to organize women and give women power in their organizing, or they lose. It happened in Vietnam. It happened in the 30s in this country, where male workers went on strike, and ultimately it was the women who needed to take up bats and surround them and fight off the cops. Are you going to have some person tell those women they can't do that? They're going to get hit with a bat if they get that. And they'll be right, and we'll join them.
That would mean, though, that a lot of men would have to then sort of contradictory to their ideology.
They will have to, otherwise they will lose. That's the reality.
Because if their ideology, such as...
But that ideology isn't just a Syrian ideology.
It's not. Like, even Jehovah's Witnesses do not have women in power in their religion, and that's a branch of Christianity.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, in general, any religion that has a very strong patriarchy, ideology, will then people will have to question themselves.
Yeah, but that question isn't just going
to be united to eradicate sexism. You will have to then contradict your own ideology.
Yeah, and that contradiction is going to have to happen not just for people who practice a religion, but for those of us who don't practice a religion, because all of us have been impacted and have been raised in a sexist society. Mm-hmm. And we're all going to have to come to a new understanding of what a real world, a real just world would look like. So we're in for all sorts of surprises. And those overturnings, those revolutions, this revolution isn't just going to be an overturning of state power, which it will need to be. It's going to be overturning of things in our minds about how things really are. Mm-hmm. And the struggle is going to have to reveal really what our true strength, how our true strength can be realized. Mm-hmm. And it will not be realized by putting women down. Mm-hmm. And if we try to do that, the capitalists will make us pay a price for that. Mm-hmm. And so again, all this challenging sexism, challenging racism, is only so we can fight better. Mm-hmm. That's the reason for it. And if it gets in the way of that fight, then it's got to go. Mm-hmm. And that's what will happen to some of these things will be culturally shed out of the revolution, if we can get there. And it's not just the Syrian culture that's going to be shed; it's the American culture that's going to have to be shed. Mm-hmm. So all of us have got a lot of clothing to take off. Mm-hmm. And a lot of garbage to get out of our brains. But I think there's a Western notion that the garbage exists in those countries that are poor or backwards. That's partially a chauvinistic notion of why that partially justifies bombing and invading those countries in the first place. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I don't accept that.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I mean, I think we will continue to explore this topic because I think that even with the climate changes happening, climate migration will be happening from many of the islands, and migration will just be an ongoing conversation that is happening globally. And that is something that we have to continually talk about. And I think nationalism is going to continue. I don't know what breaking point it will happen where working class will feel that both parties betray them. Really.
Right. And I think the only alternative to that growing nationalism is an internationalism. And that internationalism isn't just like, I like going and tasting the food in other countries. That internationalism is, I am brothers and sisters with workers all across the globe, and that solidarity is built out of a notion that we need to fight together to overturn capitalism. Mm-hmm. It's an internationalism based on the need to join with our working class brothers and sisters across the globe in common struggle. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's the only reason for it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is that it?
Yeah.
Andy?
I'll
leave it at that.
Yeah. Next week?
You wanted to do something.
I was thinking
an interview
about
with someone, no?
Possibly an interview with your friend, but I also think...
with mine or with a new audience listener?
No, that won't be happening for a while.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. We actually if you look at our YouTube comments on on the episode around
California burning,
there was somebody who actually is an engineer, and he had some really interesting comments to make on YouTube. So I contacted him. I thought he had some good stuff to say, and we'll see what happens. That's going to be more down the road. But I wanted to say, I thought maybe the G20. There's a lot of interesting things coming out of that that I think might be worth discussing.
Yeah. That's actually, I think, better because my friend's not ready.
Okay.
Yeah. So we will most likely be discussing the G20 thing.
All right.
But the G20 will be connected as well, can we say, maybe with what is the climate change that's happening in Poland?
You can
the
do
conversation
climate change.
they're
it's
having.
About oil. It's about the bin Salman. It's about U.S. and China. Everything's going on there. That's a
international politics, foreign policy.
shit show over there, man. So it's Argentina. It's in Argentina.
Argentina.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of interesting things to talk about, and I'm going to read some stuff. You can read some stuff, and we can just go on.
All right. I want to make sure that our listeners remember that they can always rate us, review, and subscribe, and best of all, share on either of the 5 platforms that we are on: Stitcher, BitChute, iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. Mostly our traffic is happening from iTunes, so please rate and review from iTunes there. And
write comments on YouTube.
Yeah, like someone that did. Yeah. And there was something else I wanted to mention. I need more fish oil. Forget it. It was something to add at the end. But,
okay.
Oh well, I'll just remember when the vehicle was. I actually have my vehicle today.
Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah. Edit this.
Look at you, just going in and out. You're giving people like, well,
no. I forgot there was something at the end. But if I remember, I will add it.
All right.
All right.
So we'll see you next week.
We'll see everyone next week.
All right. Bye-bye.
Ciao.